day.
In the early morning hours of Sunday, June 23rd, Jacksonville rapper Charles Jones arrived at Teaser's Gentlemen's Club in Tampa for a paid performance.
Four men walked into that Tampa courtroom on May 8, 2026, believing their attorneys might poke holes in the case. They sat at that defense table for almost a full month. They listened to the testimony. They watched the surveillance videos roll in court. They saw their own text messages flashed across a projector screen right in front of the jury. And when that jury finally came back after 8 hours of deliberation, 8 hours, fam, the four-person stood up and repeated the same word 4 different times. Guilty, 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 first-degree premeditated murder for every last one of them. Isaiah Chance, Sean Gathright, Rashad Murphy, Davian Murphy, every single one. Finished. No cap, no loopholes, no hung jury, no mistrial. The jury looked those men straight in the eyes and basically said, "Y'all did this, we know y'all did this, and this case is over." And while all that was unfolding inside that Tampa courtroom, while the verdicts were being read and some of the defendants were falling apart emotionally, Julio's mother, Sandrika Mays, sat there watching every second of it. The woman who buried her son during what was supposed to be his 26th birthday celebration? The woman who watched 5 people get arrested one by one over several months. The woman who never folded. Not once. Not publicly. Not even when Davian Murphy disappeared for 6 months and nobody knew where he was. She sat there and witnessed justice play out in real time. And she had something to say afterward. Y'all really need to hear this entire story. Because this ain't just about a guilty verdict. It's about everything it took to finally get here. It's about a mother who refused to stop believing. It's about what really happened on June 23rd, 2024, the night Charles Jones lost his life. It's about 4 men who moved like they were untouchable until reality finally caught up with them. This is the full breakdown. Let's get into it. To understand why this verdict hit so differently, you first gotta understand who Charles Jones was before the world knew him as Julio Foolio. And you gotta understand the environment he came from. Foolio was raised in Jacksonville, Florida, specifically around the 6 Block area. And by the time he reached his mid-20s, he had become one of the most talked about rappers to ever come out of that city. Not just because of the music gang, but because of everything he survived. Foolio had lived through losses that would crush most people. He rapped about real pain because he was actually living it. Funerals, shootings, beef. That wasn't just internet talk. It was active in the streets. His name started blowing up nationwide around 2021. And a big reason for that was the beef. Youngin Ace, who prosecutors later tied to rival gang ATK, Ace's top killers, dropped a song called Who I Smoke that many people saw as a direct shot at Foolio and his dead ops. Foolio came back swinging with everything he had. Beatbox remix. When I See You. Diss for diss, song for song. The situation got deeply personal. And it got loud online fast. But while fans treated it like entertainment, the reality behind it was way darker. This was a real documented gang war involving 6, Block on one side and ATK plus 1,000, 200 on the other. And this wasn't just rap drama. Prosecutors later stood in court and said it plainly. There's a real gang war happening in Jacksonville. ATK and 1,000, 200 are at war with 6 Block. It is blatant. They weren't overstating anything. Multiple people had already lost their lives. The violence had been documented for years, and the men eventually convicted in Foolio's murder were right in the center of it all. That's the backdrop, fam. That's why what happened on June 23rd, 2024 wasn't random. According to prosecutors, it was planned out. Now here's where I really need y'all paying attention. Because the details behind this case tell you exactly how premeditated prosecutors believed this murder was. June 14th, 2024, just 9 days before his death, Foolio posted flyers on Instagram announcing he'd be in Tampa celebrating his birthday. Regular promo. Just letting people know he was coming through. Basic artist behavior, nothing unusual. But prosecutors say the second those flyers hit Instagram, the countdown started. Because the men who would later allegedly pull the trigger saw those posts and immediately began putting a plan together. These 4 men, Chance, Gathright, Rashad Murphy, and Davian Murphy, along with a woman named Alicia Andrews, who was Chance's girlfriend.
Isaiah Chance, Elisa Andrews, Sean Gathright, Davion Murphy, and Rashard Murphy are all accused of playing a role in Jones's death and are all charged with 1 count of murder in the first degree, premeditated, with the discharge of a firearm.
Drove from Jacksonville to Tampa on June 22nd, the day before the murder. They weren't heading there to party. They weren't trying to network. They allegedly came with a purpose. The prosecution described it exactly like this: a coordinated mission to eliminate Charles Jones. On the night of June 23rd, Julio was moving around Tampa, clubs, venues, celebrating his birthday. And the entire time, according to the evidence, Chance and Andrews were tracking his every move.
Celebrating his birthday and posted on his social media his locations several times throughout that night. Surveillance video was critical in this investigation, as suspects were seen on video following Jones from location to location.
Following him through the city in a silver Chevrolet Cruze, while Gathright, Rashad Murphy, and Davian Murphy rode behind in a Chevrolet Impala. Two separate vehicles, synchronized movements. This wasn't a random opportunity falling into somebody's lap. Prosecutors painted it as a full surveillance operation. At one point during the night, Julio ended up at an Airbnb, but according to his lawyer, he was asked to leave because too many people were there. So Charles Jones and his people had to relocate. They eventually checked into a Holiday Inn near the University of South Florida on McKinley Drive, and that's where everything went down. At some point,
in the early morning hours of Sunday, June 23rd, Jacksonville rapper Charles Jones arrived at Teaser's Gentlemen's Club in Tampa for a paid performance.
He is the gentleman wearing the red beanie hat.
That's Tampa Police Homicide Detective Juan Ramos identifying the rapper, known as Julio Foolio, in new surveillance video from the club's parking lot. Suspects Alicia Andrews, Isaiah Chance, and Sean Gathright watched this video in court Thursday, too. All three faced charges in Jones's death in what investigators say was an ongoing rival gang war. After leaving Teasers, the rapper went down the street to Truth 18 nightclub for an after party, posting on social media in live time.
This is the video here from his Instagram.
Surveillance video from outside that club shows how two suspect vehicles continued to follow Jones, just as they did at Teasers, and eventually to the Home 2 Suites near USF.
They're approaching the victim's position on foot.
Video from the hotel and a parked Tesla show three shooters firing several shots at the vehicle Jones was riding in, killing him.
Within 1 month of the murder, law enforcement made their move. In July 2024, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office held a press conference announcing the arrests of Sean Gathright, Alicia Andrews, and Isaiah Chance, all charged with first-degree murder.
Chance, Andrews, and Gathright were arrested over the weekend in Jacksonville.
At the same press conference, authorities named Rashad Murphy and Davian Murphy as wanted suspects. Rashad got arrested less than 24 hours after the announcement. But Davian Murphy vanished. 6 months, fam. A full 6 months. He was out there somewhere, while investigators kept building the case, while Foolio's family waited, while the streets kept watching every update. That chapter finally ended in January 2025, when the JSO SWAT team and gang unit, working with the U.S. Marshals Service, tracked Davian to an apartment on LaBelle Street in Jacksonville and took him into custody.
Davian Murphy and Rashard Murphy are still fugitives of justice, and we are working closely with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office and the U.S. Marshals to apprehend them.
That's when Foolio's mother, Sandrika Mays, spoke publicly. She released a statement obtained by Action News Jax saying, "I'm thankful for the capture of 5 suspects that had involvement with the murder of my son, Charles Jones II. I never once did not believe that those responsible wouldn't be caught." She said she was forever grateful. But pay attention to what she didn't do. She didn't celebrate recklessly. She didn't disrespect anybody. She stayed composed. She was thankful, and she made it crystal clear that from day one, she believed the people responsible would eventually get caught. She never doubted it. That's a mother who kept herself together while the whole world watched her grieve. That's somebody who held on to faith when most people probably wouldn't have. Before the main trial, before those 4 men stood in court together, there was Alicia Andrews, and her case revealed a lot about how prosecutors planned to handle this entire situation. Andrews was tried separately in October 2025. Prosecutors argued she acted as the lookout, the person helping track Foolio's movements through Tampa that night. She booked the Airbnb in Tampa. Yeah, the exact Airbnb Foolio stopped at before being asked to leave. The reservation was under her name. Texts shown in court allegedly placed her coordinating with Chance about Jones's location. Gathwright's girlfriend was also allegedly used to gather intel on Julio's whereabouts at a nightclub. Multiple layers of surveillance. The defense argued Andrews wasn't part of a gang. had limited understanding of the bigger plot, and wasn't even there when weapons were being prepared. They portrayed her as someone who got dragged into the situation through her relationship. The jury landed somewhere in the middle. They found her guilty, but on the lesser charge of manslaughter instead of first-degree murder. She was also found not guilty on the conspiracy charge. Now here's where things got complicated. Andrews later tried to delay her sentencing, filing a motion claiming Judge Michelle Cisco was biased against her defense team. She was originally supposed to be sentenced in December 2025, but that got pushed back after her attorneys appealed. Florida's 2nd District Court of Appeals actually agreed with her argument and removed Judge Cisco from the sentencing process. A new judge, Kimberly Fernandez, was assigned in January 2026. As of the time this was written, Andrews still had not been sentenced. But what the Andrews trial really accomplished was setting the tone. It confirmed the prosecution's overall theory inside a courtroom. It laid out the roadmap. So when the 4 men finally went to trial in April 2026, the state already had experience with the strategy. They knew what arguments landed, they knew what the defense would likely say, and they came prepared. April 22nd, 2026, the trial begins, and immediately things got intense. On opening day, Davion Murphy, one of the defendants and alleged shooters, was caught on camera appearing to laugh while prosecutors detailed how Julio had been hunted, followed, and ambushed. And this man reportedly had a smirk on his face. The internet reacted instantly. People called the behavior disgusting. One YouTube comment on the Law and Crime stream described it as an attempt to act tough before facing a long prison sentence. Whatever the reason was, it definitely didn't help his image, and people remembered it. Then there was another moment during the trial. Sean Gathright appeared on surveillance footage inside a police interrogation room, pacing around with a blanket on the table, suggesting he'd been sitting there for a while before climbing onto the table and trying to push through the ceiling tiles in an apparent escape attempt. Not exactly the actions of somebody calm and confident in their innocence, gang. Now, let's get into the evidence, because this is where prosecutors really built the case piece by piece. The state presented cell phone data tracking the defendant's movements from Jacksonville to Tampa the day before the murder. They introduced surveillance footage showing the Cruise and the Impala following Julio to different locations throughout Tampa that night. Investigators recovered 31 9mm shell casings from the scene along with projectile fragments. Ballistics analysis allegedly linked the gunfire to 3 shooters, consistent with prosecutors' theory that Gathright, Rashad Murphy, and Davion Murphy were the shooters, while Chance and Andrews handled surveillance duties. There was also a Tesla parked at the hotel. Its built-in Sentry Mode camera, which automatically records movement around the vehicle, captured footage from the scene. A rifle was fired so close to that Tesla that the blast itself triggered the car alarm. Really think about that. Prosecutors said these men came carrying rifles modified so shell casings wouldn't be left behind. According to the state, that detail alone showed planning ahead of time. After the murder, prosecutors pointed to Rashad Murphy's Instagram activity. Posts they described as celebratory. One photo referenced Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, the GOAT, with laughing emojis attached. Another post reportedly said, "Hate me kindly." The prosecutor told the jury, and I'm paraphrasing here, "There is nothing entertaining about a gang war." And on June 23, 2024, that war allegedly spilled into Tampa. The prosecution also introduced music videos into evidence. A video titled "Julio Dead" was released by a rival gang only days after the shooting, and prosecutors used it to argue motive and mindset. Now, to be fair, the defense did push back, and some of their arguments weren't weak either. Gathright's attorney argued his client's actual phone was never recovered as evidence, meaning prosecutors were relying heavily on cell tower data, which the defense claimed can sometimes be unreliable. He also argued the rifle recovered from Gathright's home, a house shared with his mother, didn't match the shape of the weapon visible in surveillance footage. His lawyer compared Gathright to a puzzle piece that simply didn't fit. He also pointed out that JSO Detective Ramos testified investigators didn't even know who Sean Gathright was until Tampa police brought his name into the picture. Chance's attorney argued that simply being in Tampa didn't automatically make his client part of a murder plot. Being in a city isn't a crime. He also argued that Chance didn't legally qualify as a documented gang member. No gang tattoos, no formal gang documentation. According to the defense, the state could only prove that Chance was riding in a car with Andrews and an unidentified driver. Rashad Murphy's lawyer argued his client's cell phone records didn't show him traveling from Jacksonville to Tampa during the relevant timeline. He claimed Rashad originally lied about being in Tampa not because he was guilty, but because he feared being linked to the shooting after learning the vehicle used during the surveillance operation was tied to his account. According to the defense, Rashad believed the cruise was only being used to move items for his incarcerated brother, not to stalk and kill somebody. And on paper, these weren't terrible arguments. Circumstantial cases are difficult by nature. Defense attorneys are supposed to create doubt, and they definitely tried. But the jury wasn't convinced. 8 hours of deliberation. Honestly, for a month-long capital murder trial involving 4 defendants, that's not even very long. They came back, and they convicted every single one of them. First-degree murder across the board, no exceptions. May 8, 2026, after more than 7 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. Isaiah Chance guilty of first-degree premeditated murder. Sean Gathright guilty of first-degree premeditated murder. Rashad Murphy guilty of first-degree premeditated murder. Davian Murphy guilty of first-degree premeditated murder. All 4 were also convicted on conspiracy charges. Rashad, Davian, and Gathright were additionally found guilty on lesser-included charges. And here's the moment the internet can't stop talking about fam. Compare this to Davian Murphy laughing in court earlier in the trial. Because once that verdict landed, one of the defendants was crying. The vibe inside that courtroom on opening day versus verdict day was completely different. At the beginning, some of these men walked in with that tough guy energy, like they believed they might beat the case, or at least like they weren't about to show weakness. But when those 12 jurors came back, and that 4-person kept saying guilty over and over again, when it finally hit them that they weren't going home maybe ever again, that energy changed fast. Because this isn't just any conviction, gang. This is a capital murder case in Florida. Now the penalty phase begins immediately. The same jury that convicted them now has to decide whether these men spend the rest of their lives behind bars or receive the death penalty. And under Florida law, the jury doesn't even have to be unanimous to recommend death. 8 out of 12 jurors is enough. 8 votes can lead to a judge imposing the death penalty. Really let that sink in. These 4 men are now staring at either dying in prison or being executed by the state of Florida. That's not exaggeration. That's literally where this case goes next. State Attorney Susie Lopez spoke after the verdict and said, "These defendants brought a gang war from Jacksonville into Hillsborough County, and their violence ends here. This guilty verdict delivers accountability and justice for Charles Jones's family, but it also sends a clear message that this community will not tolerate ruthless and calculated violence." And honestly, that statement hits differently when you really think about what this trial represented. This wasn't just one murder case, it was a message. A Jacksonville gang war spilled into Tampa and left a 6-year-old dead on his birthday in front of witnesses in a hotel parking lot near a university. And the state of Florida spent nearly 2 years building this case, running 2 separate trials, and walked away with 5 convictions. 1 manslaughter conviction. They didn't miss. Now, let's bring this back to the real center of the story. Because yes, the verdict matters, the evidence matters, the defendants matter, but at the heart of all this is a mother. Sandrika Mays didn't just lose her son. She lost him during what was supposed to be a birthday celebration. She lost him because her son posted on Instagram that he was coming to Tampa. She lost him because the people who wanted him dead were allegedly monitoring social media. She lost him in a hotel parking lot in a city that wasn't even home. And through all of it, the arrests, the months waiting for Davian to finally get caught, the Andrews trial in October 2025, and this month-long capital murder trial, she stayed composed publicly. She never folded. When Davian was finally arrested back in January 2025, she said she was forever grateful. And she said she never once doubted the people responsible would eventually be found. That's a woman standing on conviction. That's a mother who turned unimaginable grief into something solid and unshakable. And the fact that this verdict finally came down, all 4 defendants all guilty of first-degree murder, that's the answer she's been waiting on since June 23, 2024. Does it bring Charles back? No, nothing can do that. But accountability in a courtroom with the possibility that the people accused of planning and carrying out her son's murder could face the harshest penalties possible, that's not small. That's everything the legal system can realistically offer. And it's important to say this plainly. Not every victim's family gets this kind of outcome. Some murder cases go cold forever. Some end in acquittals. Some drag on for decades without answers. The fact that all 5 suspects connected to Foolio's murder, all 5 were convicted within 2 years of his death, that's rare. That speaks to the investigation. That speaks to witnesses coming forward. And it speaks to the digital trail. Investigators say these men left behind social media posts, text messages, recognizable vehicles appearing on camera after camera after camera. They allegedly believed they were untouchable. The jury clearly disagreed. Now here's where I need y'all to zoom out for a minute, because this case is bigger than Foolio, bigger than Jacksonville, bigger than one gang war. This trial highlighted something courts across the country are still debating right now: rap music and social media being used as evidence. Prosecutors played drill rap videos from rival gangs in front of the jury. They analyzed lyrics. They introduced Instagram posts. They used music videos to argue motive and celebration of violence. The defense fought back hard on that point. Defense attorneys argued drill rap is often about trolling, disrespect, image, and clout chasing, not literal confessions. Just because somebody raps about violence doesn't automatically mean they committed violence. One detective even admitted during cross-examination that some conclusions about lyrics were open to interpretation, and this is a real debate happening in courtrooms nationwide. Multiple cases have involved rap lyrics being introduced as evidence, and there are serious concerns about whether that's fair because creative expression can end up being criminalized, and the line between performance and confession isn't always obvious. The jury in this case seemed to evaluate everything together instead of treating lyrics alone as proof. But the fact those videos were used in a death penalty case tells you exactly where the legal system is heading. Then there's the social media angle. Foolio announced his Tampa trip on Instagram. Prosecutors say the people who targeted him tracked him through Instagram. After his death, one of the defendants allegedly posted celebratory content on Instagram. The digital footprint of this entire case, from planning to aftermath, existed on phones and social media accounts, and prosecutors followed that trail all the way to first-degree murder convictions. That's the reality now, gang. The streets and the internet are basically the same place, and once something goes online, it doesn't just disappear because somebody wants it gone. The penalty phase was scheduled to begin Monday, May 11th, 2026, and continue through Friday. The same 12 jurors who convicted these 4 men now have to hear arguments over whether they should live or die. Prosecutors will present aggravating factors, the coordinated and premeditated nature of the attack, the multiple victims, and the allegation that this violence was tied to organized gang activity. Defense attorneys will present mitigating factors, personal history, upbringing, mental health, anything that could humanize these men in front of a jury that just convicted them of murder. Then the jury deliberates again, and then they decide. Under Florida law, if at least 8 jurors recommend death, the judge can impose the death penalty. If fewer than 8 recommend death, the sentence becomes life in prison. The judge still has some discretion, but the jury's recommendation carries major weight. As for Alicia Andrews, who was convicted of manslaughter back in October 2025, she's still waiting to be sentenced after successfully getting the original judge removed from her case. A new judge is now handling it. Manslaughter in Florida carries a possible sentence of up to 15 years, so her future remains unresolved. But for the 4 men accused of carrying out this murder, resolution is coming. One way or another, their lives are changed forever. And Foolio's mother, the woman who said from the very beginning she never doubted they'd be caught, now gets to sit with that reality. Real, recognize, real fam. And the real here is this. Charles Jones built a career telling the truth about where he came from. He rapped about pain. He rapped about losses, loyalty, survival, and the violence surrounding him. And when his life ended in that Tampa parking lot on his 26th birthday, the people who loved him could have completely fallen apart. But they didn't. His mother stayed strong. Law enforcement kept building the case. 2 separate trials. 5 convictions. And now, those 4 men sit in a Tampa courtroom facing the possibility that the state of Florida could take their lives the same way prosecutors say they took his. I'm not here to tell anybody how they should feel about the death penalty. That's a much bigger debate. But I will say this. When prosecutors argue that a murder was planned weeks ahead, when investigators say a man was tracked across a city all night, when 2 vehicles and multiple shooters were allegedly coordinated, when rifles were supposedly modified to avoid leaving shell casings behind, and when celebratory posts allegedly hit Instagram afterward, the jury is going to look at those details closely. And in this case, they did. Guilty. 4 times, no exceptions. To Foolio's mother, Sandrika Mays, respect to you for holding it down for your son the way a mother should. And to Foolio himself, Charles Jones II, your music still lives on. Your city still remembers your name, and the people convicted in your murder case are likely never walking free again. That's the real tea. Drop your thoughts below. Y'all think they get life for the death penalty? Let me know. And if you still ain't subscribed, what are y'all doing? We cover these stories with full respect and no filter. Like, subscribe, hit the bell. You already know the vibes. Peace.